They left the injured Apache girl in the desert until a lone cowboy broke every rule to save her. The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of golden sand and harsh sunlight. The wind blew hot and dry, carrying whispers of ancient rocks and distant hills. Birds circled above, searching for shade, while the earth below seemed to radiate heat in waves. Through this unforgiving land, a small group of Apache people moved slowly, carefully, knowing that the desert could either protect them or destroy them. Among them was a young girl, barely 12, her dark hair tied back with a simple leather strap. Her name was Nayeli. She had always been curious and brave, but the desert was a test unlike any she had ever faced. They had been traveling since dawn. The adults led the way, scanning the horizon for danger, while the children followed closely behind, carrying what little they could manage. Water was scarce, and the sun was relentless. Each step was a struggle. Nayeli stumbled several times, her small feet sinking into the soft sand, and each time one of the women would steady her, whispering words of encouragement. Yet despite her efforts, she could feel the weakness growing inside her, a pain that seemed to stretch through every muscle, through every bone. It had started earlier in the morning when a distant sound had broken the quiet of the desert. The group had paused and the elders had listened carefully. There was a faint noise, like horses moving quickly, the crack of distant wood, and then shouting. Breath, fear spread quickly. The men whispered to each other, faces tense, scanning the hills and dunes for any sign of danger. Nayeli did not fully understand what was happening, only that the adults were scared and fear was contagious. As the sun climbed higher, the sounds drew closer. Figures appeared on the horizon, moving fast. Nayeli could see that they were not from her tribe. Her heart began to pound, and her legs shook as she tried to keep up with the others. Suddenly, chaos erupted. The strangers came down the small dunes and attacked. Arrows flew through the air, and shouts filled the silence of the desert. Nayeli felt the sharp pain in her side. She cried out, stumbling to the ground, unable to move quickly. She watched, helpless, as the adults around her tried to defend themselves. The men grabbed their weapons and fought bravely, but the strangers were too many. Nayeli's mother appeared beside her for a moment, her eyes full of fear and sadness, but then she was pulled away by another man, leaving Nayeli alone on the sand. Pain shot through her body as she struggled to rise. Her side burned and she felt dizzy. Every sound seemed distant and muffled. The desert was not just hot now. It felt like it was closing in on her, pressing her down, daring her to give up. When the fight ended, Nayeli saw only silence. The strangers had gone, riding off into the distance, leaving behind a trail of sand and dust. Her small chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath. She looked around desperately for any familiar face. The others were gone. Well, she was alone. For a moment she thought they might come back, but the desert was quiet, and the only sound was the wind whistling across the dunes. Panic began to rise inside her. She called out, her voice trembling. Someone help me! But no one answered. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time felt strange in the desert. Nayeli crawled, dragging herself across the sand. Her small hands scraped against the rough ground, leaving red marks that mixed with the dust. Her legs were weak, and her body ached. But she forced herself to move. Every step was a battle between hope and despair. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her about the spirits of the desert and the strength of their people. She whispered those stories to herself, repeating the words as if they could give her the power to stand. As the sun reached its highest point, the heat became unbearable. Nayeli's throat was dry, Her lips cracked, and her vision blurred. She found a small rock outcrop and tried to crawl behind it for shade. She rested for a few moments, her body trembling, her mind racing. She thought of her family, of the small home they had left behind, and tears streamed down her dusty face. The desert seemed endless, a vast expanse with no end and no help in sight. Despite her fear, Nayeli tried to think clearly. She remembered the little water bottle her mother had tied to her bag. With shaking hands, she unscrewed the cap and took small sips. Each drop was precious, and she savored it, knowing she could not waste a single moment. The desert was cruel, but she was determined not to give up. She whispered to herself that she had to survive, that someone would come for her, that she could not let the desert win. As night approached, the temperature dropped slightly, but the desert was still unforgiving. Nayeli huddled near the rock, trying to stay warm, but her body ached with exhaustion and pain. She had no choice but to rest, though sleep was impossible, with the fear and the loneliness pressing on her mind.
She thought about the adults who had left her behind. At first she was angry, furious that they had abandoned her, but soon anger gave way to confusion.
Did they really have no choice? Were they trying to protect her by leaving her behind? The thought was unbearable, yet she could not stop herself from wondering. She closed her eyes briefly, trying to imagine a place where she was safe, where her parents were holding her hand. Her mind wandered to the stories of brave girls in her tribe, girls who had survived impossible situations. Nayeli imagined herself as one of them, strong and unafraid, even as her body trembled from pain and fear. The desert wind whispered around her, carrying sand into her hair and eyes, but she refused to let it silence her hope. By the next morning, Nayeli had learned to move slowly, conserving her energy while searching for any sign of life. She followed faint tracks in the sand, hoping they led to someone who could help. Her small body ached, but she forced herself onward, driven by the thought that she could not give up. Each step was a triumph, each breath a victory. The sun rose, casting long shadows across the desert, and she kept moving, guided by instinct and sheer will. Nayeli's story in the desert was not just about survival. It was about courage, resilience, and the determination to live even when the world seemed to have abandoned her. She had been left behind, alone and injured, but she refused to let fear defeat her. Every scrape, every painful step was a testament to her spirit. The desert was cruel, but it was also a place of lessons, testing the limits of her strength and the depth of her hope. By the time the sun reached its peak again, Nayeli's body was exhausted, but her spirit remained unbroken. She had survived the first night, endured the scorching heat, and faced the loneliness and fear of being alone in the vast desert. Though she was weak and in pain, she had learned to trust herself, to rely on her own instincts, and to believe that help could come even from the most unexpected place. Nayeli did not know what the day would bring. She did not know if she would ever see her family again, or if someone would find her before it was too late. But she held on to hope like a small flame, fragile but unwavering. The desert had tested her, and she had passed the first trial. Little did she know that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined, that a stranger, a lone cowboy, would soon appear and challenge everything she thought she knew about trust, kindness, and courage. As she lay behind the rock, closing her eyes for a moment, Nayeli whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would survive. She would not give up. And she would hold on to hope, no matter how endless the desert seemed. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, casting long shadows across the rolling dunes. The heat was already beginning to build. but a cool breeze moved through the rocks, offering small relief. Naeli, the young Apache girl, stirred in her hiding spot behind the small rock bend. Her body ached from the injuries and the long crawl through the sand, but her mind was alert. She listened intently to the desert, hoping for any sound of life. Every whisper of wind, every bird in the sky, seemed magnified. She had spent the night alone, frightened, and yet she had survived. Somewhere far in the distance, a figure appeared on the horizon. At first, Naeli thought it might be a shadow or a trick of the heat. But as the figure drew closer, she saw that it was a man riding a horse. He was tall, dressed in worn clothes, with a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. His horse moved steadily across the dunes, its hooves kicking up small clouds of sand. Naeli's heart leapt. Could this be a stranger? Could this person be friend or foe?
She remembered the chaos from the day before and felt fear creep into her chest once more.
The cowboy moved carefully. He had been traveling through the desert for several days, delivering supplies to a small settlement beyond the dunes. He knew this land well.
Every rock, every plant, and every change in the wind spoke to him about danger or safety.
When he spotted signs of struggle, footprints, a torn piece of cloth half buried in the sand, and a faint trail of blood, his instincts told him to investigate. He slowed his horse and scanned the area. The desert could be deadly, and any misstep could mean disaster. Naeli, hidden behind the rock, watched him with wide, cautious eyes. She did not move. The man's horse kicked up sand as he carefully approached the area where she lay. He dismounted slowly, making sure not to startle anyone or anything. The cowboy's eyes were sharp and alert, taking in every detail. The tracks in the sand, the disturbed rocks, and finally, the small, trembling figure huddled behind the outcrop. He crouched down a short distance away, careful not to scare her, and called out in a gentle voice, "There."
"Are you hurt?" Naeli froze. The sound of a human voice so close made her heart race.
But she wanted to run, to hide, but her injuries made movement nearly impossible. She whispered, almost inaudibly,
I am hurt." Her voice was small, fragile, but the cowboy could hear her.
He moved slowly, taking small steps, showing that he meant no harm. He knew the desert had made her afraid, and he wanted to earn her trust. The cowboy knelt down and gently placed a hand on a rock nearby. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Can you come a little closer?" His voice was calm and steady, like water running through a quiet stream. Naeli hesitated. She had been abandoned once already. She did not want to trust another person so easily. But the kindness in his eyes, the careful way he moved, and the gentle tone of his voice made her feel a spark of hope. Slowly she crawled toward him, every movement painful, every step a struggle. The man noticed her injuries immediately. There was a deep cut on her side, and her legs were scratched and bruised from the sand and rocks. But her small body trembled with weakness. The cowboy acted quickly, checking her wounds and assessing the situation. He tore a piece of cloth from his own shirt, careful to avoid causing her more pain, and gently pressed it against the cut to stop the bleeding. "But you're going to be okay," he said, his voice steady, filled with quiet determination.
"I'm going to help you." Naeli's eyes filled with tears.
But she wanted to believe him, but the fear in her heart was strong. "Why? Why would you help me?" she whispered. Her voice shook. The cowboy smiled softly. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "No one should be left alone out here. Not you, not anyone.
His words carried a strength that made her believe him.
The cowboy knew the desert could not be underestimated. He understood that they needed to move carefully and conserve energy. He helped Naeli stand, supporting her small frame with his strong hands.
Step by step, she followed him, leaning on him when her legs could not hold her.
The horse remained nearby, grazing cautiously, sensing the tension and the fragility of the situation. Every movement was measured. Every moment was precious. As they traveled together, the cowboy talked softly, sharing stories of the desert. He told her about the plants that could give water, the rocks that marked safe paths, and the animals to watch out for. Naeli listened, fascinated and comforted by his knowledge. His voice was a lifeline, a calm presence in a world that had been so harsh to her. She began to feel a sense of safety she had not known since the attack. Despite the warmth of the sun, the desert was relentless. The wind carried sand that stung their faces, and the heat threatened to drain their energy. The cowboy found what little shade he could, small rock outcrops or clusters of scrub, and encouraged Naeli to rest when necessary. He found small water sources along the way and gave her sips slowly, careful not to let her drink too quickly. Every decision he made was careful and deliberate, aimed at keeping her alive. As they moved, Naeli's trust grew. She asked questions, first softly, then with more confidence.
Why are you helping me?
She asked again, but this time not in fear but curiosity. Because no one should be left alone, he repeated. I've seen too much pain in this desert. I want to do what I can to make it right. She thought about her parents, about the people who had left her, and the cowboy's words filled her heart with hope. Maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world. Hours passed. The desert seemed endless, but the cowboy's determination never wavered. He moved steadily, setting a pace that Naeli could follow. When she faltered, he lifted her carefully, carrying her for short distances. He spoke softly to distract her from the pain, telling small stories about animals, stars, and the quiet beauty of the desert. Naeli listened, her fear slowly giving way to trust and even a faint smile now and then. As evening approached, the temperature cooled slightly, but the desert was still unforgiving. The cowboy found a small hollow, a natural shelter formed by rocks, and helped Naeli rest.
He made a small camp, careful to keep a low profile, and prepared a simple drink from what little water he had.
Naeli rested, her body exhausted, but her heart lighter than it had been since she woke alone. The presence of another person, someone willing to risk everything for her, gave her strength. That night, under a sky filled with stars, Naeli finally allowed herself to sleep. The cowboy kept watch nearby, alert and ready for any danger. He thought about the girl's bravery, about the challenges she had already faced, and about the journey still ahead. He knew that helping her meant bending the rules, taking risks that others would not understand. But he also knew that sometimes doing the right thing was more important than following rules. Naeli dreamed of her village, of the people she had loved, and of the kindness she had experienced from the stranger. The desert night was quiet, filled only with the sound of wind and the distant call of nocturnal animals. In that silence, the bond between the girl and the cowboy grew stronger. She knew she was not alone anymore. She had someone to trust, someone to guide her, and someone willing to face the desert alongside her. By morning, the cowboy prepared to continue the journey. Naeli woke slowly, feeling stronger than she had the day before. She looked at the man who had saved her and felt gratitude and awe. The road ahead was still long and dangerous, but together they had a chance. The desert was vast, the sun relentless, and the challenges many, but they would face them side by side. And somewhere in the distance, hope glimmered like the first rays of dawn. promising that even in the harshest places, kindness and courage could light the way. The sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the sand in shades of gold and orange.
Nayeli, the young Apache girl, awoke to the soft rustling of the wind and the quiet sound of the cowboy's horse grazing nearby.
She felt a little stronger than the day before, her body still aching, but her spirit renewed by the presence of someone who truly cared for her. The cowboy had stayed close all night, keeping watch and making sure she was safe, proving silently that he would not leave her alone, no matter the risk. As the morning grew warmer, the cowboy helped Nayeli stand down. Each step she took was careful, her small frame still weak from the injuries and exhaustion.
He supported her, holding her close to steady her balance as they began to move through the sand dunes.
The desert stretched endlessly before them, waves of heat rising from the sand. Every step was a challenge, and every moment required focus. The cowboy knew they could not rush, yet he understood that staying too long in one place was dangerous as well. Their journey quickly became difficult. The desert was full of hidden dangers, deep sand that trapped their feet, prickly shrubs, and rocks that could cause further injury. Nayeli stumbled several times, but the cowboy was always there to catch her.
"You're stronger than you think," he said gently, encouraging her with every step.
His voice was calm and steady, a sharp contrast to the harsh environment around them. Each word gave her courage, each gesture gave her hope. As they moved forward, the cowboy noticed signs of recent travelers. Footprints in the sand indicated that others had passed this way not long ago. He scanned the horizon carefully, wary of danger. Settlers in this region often feared Apache people, and some would react with hostility if they found a child alone. The cowboy understood the risks. Yet he knew he could not abandon Nayeli. His instincts told him to keep moving, to stay alert, and to protect her at all costs. Hours passed, and the desert sun climbed high in the sky. Nayeli's energy began to wane, and the cowboy realized that they needed to find shade and water soon. Batiste, bioting in his spicy rucks in the distance, forming a natural shelter. Guiding her carefully, he helped her crawl behind the rocks. The small refuge offered a moment of relief, a brief pause in the relentless journey.
Nayeli rested, sipping slowly from a water container the cowboy had carried for emergencies.
Each drop was precious, and she felt renewed, even if only slightly. The cowboy examined her injuries again, cleaning the small cuts and bruises to prevent infection. He wrapped them carefully with strips of cloth torn from his own shirt. "You're doing very well," he said encouragingly. "Just a little further, and we will find a place where you can be safe." Nayeli looked at him with wide, trusting eyes. She had already begun to rely on him, seeing him as her protector in a world that had already turned cruel and lonely. As they prepared to continue, the cowboy realized that the journey ahead would require breaking rules that others might consider sacred or dangerous. He would be venturing into areas where settlers might see him as a threat, where Apache families could misunderstand his intentions. Yet he had no choice. Staying within the boundaries of safety for others could mean leaving Nayeli behind. And he refused to do that. He had to break every rule necessary to save her, guided only by the simple principle of doing what was right. With careful steps, they moved again. Desert heat. Pressed down, but the cowboy encouraged Nayeli to keep going, speaking softly, telling her stories of the desert and the stars. He taught her how to read the sun and the wind, how to spot signs of water, and how to rest in the shade without losing too much time. Nayeli listened, learning quickly from his experience. Her fear gradually began to fade, replaced by trust and even a sense of determination. She realized that she was not entirely helpless. She could contribute, could survive, with someone guiding her. As the day progressed, they faced new challenges. A sudden sandstorm swept across the dunes, blowing fine grains of sand into their faces and making it difficult to see. The cowboy shielded Nayeli with his body, using his coat to protect her eyes and mouth. They huddled together behind a large rock, waiting for the storm to pass. The wind roared and the sand whipped against them, but the cowboy's presence offered comfort and safety. Nayeli clung to him, trusting that he would guide them through. Once the storm passed, the desert was calm again, but they were further exhausted than ever. Their supplies were limited, and the cowboy knew they needed to find water soon. He spotted a faint green patch in the distance, a sign of a possible oasis or stream. Encouraging Nayeli, he led her toward it, moving slowly but steadily. Each step was measured, conserving energy while keeping their goal in mind: breath. Nayeli leaned on him, trusting his judgment and finding comfort in his steady presence. Along the way, the cowboy taught her how to spot small signs of life in the desert: tracks of animals, the shadow of trees, or a change in the wind that could signal water nearby. Nayeli absorbed every detail, understanding that knowledge could be just as important as strength in this harsh land. She began to help in small ways, pointing out signs he might have missed, carrying light supplies, and even helping him plan their path. Together they became a team, relying on each other for guidance, support, and hope. Despite the challenges, there were moments of quiet beauty.
The desert that sunset was breathtaking, the sky painted in shades of pink, purple, and gold. The cowboy stopped to let Nayeli take it in, encouraging her to breathe deeply and appreciate the calm. "Even in the hardest places there is beauty," he said softly. Nayeli nodded, feeling a small sense of peace she had not experienced since the attack.
These moments reminded her that the world was not only dangerous, it could also be kind, especially when someone like this cowboy was willing to protect her. As night fell, they set up a small camp behind a rocky outcrop. The cowboy made a fire, small and controlled, careful not to draw attention. He gave Nayeli water and helped her eat a little food. The warmth of the fire and the presence of the cowboy brought comfort and relief. She realized that, for the first time since the attack, she felt safe. She fell asleep with her head resting lightly on his lap, trusting him completely. That night, under the stars, the cowboy reflected on their journey. He knew the risks he had taken and the dangers that lay ahead. Some would see his actions as reckless or foolish, but he understood that sometimes courage meant doing what others would not.
Protecting Nayeli meant breaking rules, crossing boundaries, and facing possible hostility, yet he felt certain that it was the right choice.
His determination was unwavering. He would not let her be left behind again. Nayeli in her sleep dreamed of safety, of her village, and of the stranger who had become her protector. The desert night was quiet, but it had become a place of hope instead of fear. She had learned that even in the most difficult circumstances, kindness could exist and courage could change a life. By morning, they prepared to continue their journey. The cowboy helped Nayeli to her feet, supporting her every step. She had grown stronger through the night, bolstered by trust and determination. The desert awaited them, vast and challenging, but together they were ready. With each step, they moved closer to safety, guided by the cowboy's knowledge, bravery, and unwavering commitment to do what was right, no matter the rules or risks. The desert was still harsh, but now it felt a little less lonely. Nayeli had someone to rely on, someone to teach her, someone willing to face every danger for her sake. And for the cowboy, the desert had taken on new meaning. It was no longer only a place of survival, but a place where courage, compassion, and determination could shine brighter than the sun itself. The desert sun rose again, harsh and bright, casting long shadows over the rolling dunes. Nayeli felt a mix of fear and determination as she struggled to keep pace with the cowboy. Her small body still ached from the journey, but the lessons he had taught her the day before guided her steps. Every time her legs wobbled, he steadied her, speaking softly, encouraging her to push forward. They had been traveling for days, and each mile brought both hope and exhaustion. The cowboy scanned the horizon constantly. He knew the desert was full of dangers, some obvious and some hidden. Rocks could be unstable, sand could hide deep holes, and wild animals roamed the area searching for prey. He moved carefully, always keeping an eye on Nayeli, ready to protect her if necessary. Yet he also encouraged her to observe the desert herself, teaching her how to spot danger and how to read the signs of the land. As the day progressed, the heat became nearly unbearable. The sand reflected the sun's rays, making the desert seem like a glowing sea of fire. Nayeli's mouth was dry, and sweat ran down her face. But the cowboy reminded her to take small steps and conserve energy. "We'll find water soon," he promised. His voice was calm and strong, a steady anchor in the harsh desert. Bet. Nayeli trusted him completely, feeling comforted even in the most difficult moments. Along the way, they faced their first major obstacle. A large dune blocked their path, steep and unstable. Climbing it would be exhausting for both of them, especially for Nayeli, whose body was still recovering. The cowboy examined it carefully, choosing a path that was less steep and more secure. He held Nayeli's hand, guiding her step by step. Her feet sank into the soft sand, and she nearly fell several times, but he was always there to catch her. Together, they slowly made their way to the top. When they reached the summit, they paused, both breathing heavily, looking out over the vast desert stretching endlessly before them. Despite the difficulties, there were small moments of beauty. A hawk soared overhead, riding the warm air currents, and Nayeli pointed it out to the cowboy. "It is free," she whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. The cowboy smiled. "Yes," he said softly. "It reminds us that even here there is life and freedom." For a brief moment, the desert felt less hostile, and Nayeli's spirits lifted. Best. She felt a sense of connection to the land, to the sky, and to the man who had become her protector. As they descended the dune, they spotted a small cluster of green plants in the distance. The cowboy's eyes lit up. "Look," he said quietly. "Best. Water might be near. Let's move carefully."
Every step became a careful calculation.
Nayeli leaned on him when her legs grew tired, and he encouraged her with words of strength and reassurance. The desert was harsh, but the promise of water gave them hope and renewed determination. They reached the small patch of green and found a shallow stream trickling through the sand.
It was not much, but it was enough to restore their energy.
Nayeli knelt down and drank slowly, savoring each sip, while the cowboy checked the surrounding area for danger. They were alone, but the desert had taught him to always be cautious. Small creatures scurried near the water, and birds dipped down to drink, reminding them that life persisted even in the harshest conditions. After resting, they continued their journey. The sun was now high in the sky, and the heat pressed down on them with full force. Nayeli's small body began to struggle again, but the cowboy encouraged her to keep moving, using every technique he knew to make the journey easier. He showed her how to use her hands and feet together to move efficiently across the sand, how to rest without losing too much time, and how to stay calm even when the desert seemed unbearable.
Suddenly a loud noise echoed through the desert.
Nayeli froze, her heart pounding. The cowboy scanned the horizon quickly. It was only the wind moving rocks and sand, but the moment reminded them both that the desert was unpredictable. The cowboy spoke softly, reassuring her. "It's okay," he said. "The desert can make strange sounds, but we are safe if we stay calm. Naeli nodded, learning that fear could be managed even in the most difficult situations. As the afternoon passed, they encountered another challenge. A small canyon blocked their path, steep and rocky. The cowboy examined it and decided the safest route was to descend slowly, helping Naeli step carefully from one rock to another. Her small hands gripped his arm tightly, trusting him completely. Step by step, they navigated the canyon, supporting each other. When they finally reached the bottom, both were exhausted, but a sense of accomplishment filled the air. The desert grew colder as evening approached. Shadows stretched across the sand, and the temperature dropped quickly. The cowboy found a sheltered spot behind a large rock and helped Naeli rest. They built a small fire for warmth, careful to keep it controlled. He shared a small portion of food with her, and they ate quietly, appreciating the moment of comfort. The desert was still harsh, but they had found a moment of peace together. During the night, Naeli spoke softly to the cowboy. "I am afraid," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I do not know if we will make it." The cowboy placed a gentle hand on her shoulder.
It is okay to be afraid, he said. Courage does not mean you are never scared.
Person. Courage means you keep going even when you are afraid.
And we will make it!
Together. Naeli nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She realized that courage and trust could carry her through even the most difficult situations.
The next morning, the cowboy prepared to continue the journey. Naeli had slept better than she had in days, her body slightly stronger and her spirit renewed. Together, they moved carefully through the desert, following the small clues left by nature tracks, in the sand, changes in the wind, and the distant sight of trees or rocks that might provide shelter. The cowboy's knowledge and careful guidance kept them safe, and Naeli began to trust her own instincts as well. During the day, they faced yet another challenge. A small group of travelers appeared in the distance. The cowboy quickly assessed the situation, knowing that some people might see him helping an Apache girl as a threat. He guided Naeli to hide behind a large rock, keeping low and quiet. The travelers passed by without noticing them, but the moment reminded them both that the desert was full of uncertainties. Every step required caution. Every decision could change their fate. As evening approached, they found a safe place to rest once more. The cowboy set up a small shelter and tended to Naeli's injuries. He encouraged her to eat and drink to regain her strength for the journey ahead.
She felt a growing sense of trust and gratitude. For the first time since the attack, she believed that she might survive and that there were people who would care for her, even strangers.
The night was quiet, filled only with the sounds of the desert wind and distant animals. Naeli lay close to the cowboy, feeling safe and protected.
But she knew the journey was not over. But she also knew that she was not alone. The desert was still full of challenges, but together they could face anything.
Each step they had taken had brought them closer, not just to safety, but to a bond built on trust, courage, and care. By the next morning, they were ready to continue. The cowboy helped Naeli to her feet, supporting her every step. Her small body was stronger, her spirit braver. They moved forward, determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The desert remained vast and unforgiving, but together they had learned to navigate its dangers, to find hope in the smallest signs of life, and to trust in each other.
For Naeli, the desert had changed from a place of fear to a place of learning and growth.
For the cowboy, it was no longer only a harsh land to cross, but a place where courage, compassion, and determination could make a difference. They had faced storms, scorching heat, exhaustion, and fear, but they had survived together. Today, and ahead, a new day promised hope, strength, and the possibility of reaching safety, where Naeli could heal and begin a new chapter of her life. The morning sun rose slowly, casting soft golden light over the desert. Nayeli stirred awake, her small body tired but stronger than the day before. The cowboy was already awake, checking their small camp and making sure that everything was safe for their next move. The night had been quiet, giving them a chance to rest, and now the journey toward safety continued. Nayeli felt a mix of hope and nervousness. She knew that the desert still held challenges, but she also trusted the man who had saved her. The cowboy helped her to her feet, steadying her as she stretched her aching legs. Each step was still painful, but she was learning to move carefully, conserving energy while pushing forward. The desert stretched endlessly in front of them, waves of sand rising and falling like an ocean frozen in time. The wind was gentler than it had been in the past days, carrying with it a hint of something new, a promise of life beyond the endless dunes.
As they moved, the cowboy noticed small signs that water and shelter might be nearby.
He pointed out tracks of small animals, patches of greenery, and distant shadows that could mark a stream or a cluster of trees.
Nayeli listened intently, her mind sharp despite the fatigue.
She was learning quickly, absorbing his knowledge like a sponge, and she began to see the desert not just as a place of danger but as a land full of lessons and secrets. They reached a narrow path between two rocky hills, and the cowboy guided Nayeli carefully. The path was steep and uneven, and a single misstep could have caused serious injury. Nayeli's hands gripped his arm tightly as he led her step by step.
She was afraid, but she also trusted him completely.
"We are almost there," he said, his voice calm and reassuring.
Nayeli's heart lifted at his words. The thought of finally reaching safety gave her renewed strength. Hours passed and the sun climbed high into the sky. The heat was intense, but the cowboy encouraged Nayeli to rest in shaded areas whenever possible. He reminded her to drink slowly, to conserve her strength, and to keep her spirit focused on the goal. Nayeli obeyed, learning to manage her body and mind in ways she never had before. Every sip of water, every careful step, and every small movement brought her closer to safety. As afternoon approached, they finally spotted signs of human life. A small settlement appeared in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys, animals moving in pens, and people tending to their daily work. Nayeli's eyes widened. She had not seen a place like this in days, and her heart filled with hope. Could she finally be safe? Fast. Could she finally find someone who would care for her and protect her from the dangers of the desert? The cowboy guided her carefully, moving slowly to avoid exhaustion. "Stay close to me," he said softly. "We're almost there, but we must be careful." Nayeli nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. The settlement was unfamiliar, and she was unsure how the people would react to her presence.
But she trusted the cowboy completely.
She had no other choice, and she had learned that trust could make all the difference. As they entered the settlement, people stopped and stared. Bess. Some whispered to each other, curious about the young girl and the man who had guided her. The cowboy approached the nearest house and spoke with the adults inside, explaining that the girl had been injured in the desert and needed help. The villagers listened carefully, their faces showing concern and compassion. They offered water, food, and a place to rest. Nayeli's heart swelled with relief. She had finally found safety. The villagers led Nayeli to a small, shaded area and helped her lie down. She drank water slowly, feeling it restore her strength, and ate a little food. The cowboy stayed close, watching over her with the same quiet care he had shown since finding her in the desert. Nayeli felt a deep sense of gratitude. She realized that she had survived not just because of her own courage, but because someone had chosen to risk everything to save her. As the day passed, Nayeli began to recover more fully. The villagers treated her injuries carefully, using clean water and herbs to prevent infection. They spoke to her gently, making her feel safe and welcome. The cowboy assisted when necessary, helping her understand how to care for herself and encouraging her to rest. Nayeli's trust in him had grown deeply over the past days, and she felt a bond that could not be broken. The evening brought a cool breeze, and Nayeli sat outside, watching the sunset over the settlement. The sky was painted with shades of pink, orange, and purple. She thought about the desert, about the danger she had faced, and about the man who had saved her. Her heart was full of gratitude and wonder. She had learned that courage was not just about strength, it was also about kindness, determination, and the willingness to help others, even when it was difficult. The cowboy spoke softly beside her. "You've been very brave," he said. "Not many could have made it through what you have. You should be proud of yourself."
Nayeli looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes.
"I wouldn't have made it without you," she whispered. "I—" He shook his head gently. "No," he said, "but you made it because of your courage. I only guided you." The strength was always yours. That night, Nayeli slept peacefully for the first time in days. The settlement was safe, quiet, and filled with people who cared for her. She dreamed of her family, of the desert, and of the cowboy who had become her protector. The desert had tested her, pushed her to her limits, and taught her lessons she would never forget. But now she was safe, and she could begin to heal, both physically and emotionally. In the following days, Nayeli continued to recover. She learned from the villagers about daily life, safety, and community. She felt a growing sense of belonging, something she had not felt since being left behind in the desert. The cowboy stayed with her until she was strong enough to move independently. He taught her how to navigate the desert safely, how to read the land, and how to survive if she ever found herself in danger again. Nayeli absorbed every lesson, knowing that the knowledge would help her protect herself in the future. The day came when Nayeli was strong enough to walk without support. She stood tall, her body still small but her spirit strong. Perhaps the cowboy helped her gather her belongings and encouraged her to say goodbye to the villagers. They had all grown fond of her and admired her courage and determination. Nayeli felt a mixture of gratitude and sadness. She had found safety, but she also realized that her journey had changed her forever. Before leaving, Nayeli turned to the cowboy. "Thank you," she said simply, "but I will never forget you." He smiled gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You've done all the hard work. I only helped guide you. Remember your courage and always trust yourself." Nayeli nodded, feeling a deep sense of respect and admiration for him. As they prepared to part ways, Nayeli looked around at the settlement, the people who had helped her, and the land that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving. She realized that the desert had not defeated her. Pain. She had faced danger, fear, and exhaustion, and she had survived. She had learned the value of trust, courage, and kindness. Best. And she had discovered that even in the most difficult circumstances there were people willing to help, willing to risk everything for someone else's life. The cowboy mounted his horse and waved to Nayeli. "Breath," he said. "And remember, courage is always with you."
Nayeli waved back, tears in her eyes but a smile on her face.
She had survived the desert, faced unimaginable challenges, and discovered the strength within herself. The cowboy rode off, disappearing into the horizon, leaving Nayeli safe, strong, and ready to begin the next chapter of her life. In the days that followed, Nayeli told her story to the villagers. She spoke of the desert, of her fear, and of the man who had saved her. Her story inspired them, reminding everyone that courage, kindness, and determination could overcome even the harshest challenges. Nayeli knew she would never forget the lessons of the desert, the strength she had found within herself, or the cowboy who had risked everything to save her life. Though the desert remained vast and dangerous, Nayeli's life had changed forever. She had learned to face fear, to trust others, and to find hope even in the most difficult situations. Journey had been long and challenging, but she had survived. And as she looked toward the future, she carried with her the knowledge that courage, kindness, and hope could light even the darkest path. The sun rose once more over the settlement, casting a warm glow on Nayeli's small frame as she moved with confidence and purpose. But she had survived the desert, found safety, and discovered the strength within herself.
Her journey had been difficult, but it had also been a story of hope, bravery, and the power of human kindness.
Nayeli's life would never be the same, but it would be filled with courage, resilience, and the memory of the cowboy who had saved her when she had been most alone.